The police sirens were getting closer. I watched from my kitchen window as Corinne marched across my property like she owned it, pointing at our lakefront and shouting orders to the officers behind her. Her face was red with rage, her finger jabbing toward our front door like she was condemning criminals. "That is them right there," she screamed. "They are trespassing on HOA property and refusing to leave." My blood ran cold. After everything we had been through, after all the harassment and threats, Corinne was actually trying to have us arrested in our own home, the home we had saved for years to buy, the sanctuary we thought would finally give us peace. I looked over at my wife, who was calmly sipping her coffee at our kitchen table. She had not even looked up from her laptop. Her fingers were typing steadily, and there was something in her expression that made me realize this was not over. Not by a long shot. Because Corinne had no idea who she was really dealing with. And in about 5 minutes, her entire world was about to come crashing down. After 23 years of city living, my wife Sarah and I finally found our slice of heaven. The ranch property sat on 42 acres of rolling hills in northern Colorado, with a private lake that reflected the mountains like a mirror every morning. When we first walked the property with our realtor, I knew this was it. This was where we would build our future. Sarah had spent the last 15 years working as a federal agent, climbing the ranks until she was running major investigations for the FBI. The stress of her job had taken its toll on both of us. Late nights, dangerous cases, and the constant pressure of federal law enforcement had left us both exhausted. We needed this place. We needed the peace. "Look at that view," Sarah said on our first morning, standing on our new deck with her coffee in hand. The lake stretched out before us, completely still except for a family of ducks gliding across the surface. I cannot remember the last time I heard actual silence. I wrapped my arms around her from behind and breathed in the crisp mountain air. No sirens, no traffic, no city noise, just the gentle lapping of water against our private shoreline and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. We had spent our entire savings on this property, but it was worth every penny. The house was a beautiful log cabin-style home with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the water. We had plans to expand the deck, maybe add a boat dock, and definitely get some horses for the pasture. This was going to be our retirement dream, our place to finally relax and enjoy life. Sarah was still handling major cases, but she could work remotely most days now. Her laptop would be open on the kitchen table, video calls with other agents and prosecutors happening while she looked out at our lake. I could see the stress leaving her shoulders day by day. The constant tension in her jaw was finally relaxing. "I never thought we would actually find a place like this," she told me one evening as we sat by our fire pit, watching the sunset paint the water gold and pink. "After everything we have seen in the city, all the corruption and crime, I started to think places like this did not exist anymore. But they did exist, and this one was ours." The closest neighbors were about half a mile away through the trees, which was exactly how we wanted it. We could see a few other homes scattered around the lake, but everyone seemed to keep to themselves. It was perfect. The property came with access to the homeowners association that managed the common areas around the lake and the private roads. The HOA fees were reasonable, and the realtor assured us it was a quiet, well-managed community. Just basic maintenance and upkeep, nothing complicated. When we got the thick packet of HOA rules and regulations in the mail a few weeks after moving in, I flipped through it quickly. Standard stuff about property maintenance, no loud music, keep your grass cut, that sort of thing. Nothing unusual for a nice community like this. Sarah barely glanced at it. She was too busy setting up her home office and getting used to working from paradise instead of a cramped federal building downtown. I should have read those rules more carefully. I should have paid attention to some of the more unusual restrictions and the long list of fines for violations. But I was too happy, too content with our new life to worry about HOA politics. That was my first mistake. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was outside raking leaves when a silver sedan pulled into our driveway. A woman in her 50s climbed out, wearing a crisp business suit and carrying a clipboard like she was conducting an inspection. "Good morning," she called out with a fake smile that did not reach her eyes. "I am Corinne Mueller, the Neighborhood Compliance Coordinator for the Pine Lake HOA. I wanted to welcome you to the community and discuss a few concerns." I leaned my rake against a tree and walked over to meet her. Sarah was inside on a conference call with her team, so I figured I would handle whatever this was about. "Nice to meet you, Corinne. What concerns are you talking about?" Corinne's smile disappeared instantly. She flipped through several pages on her clipboard and pulled out a pen. "Well, for starters, your trash bins are still visible from the road. HOA regulations clearly state that all garbage containers must be stored out of sight within 24 hours of collection." I looked over at our garbage bins, which were sitting next to our garage exactly where the garbage truck had left them that morning. The truck just came by 2 hours ago. I was planning to move them after I finished the yard work. "The regulation does not provide exceptions for yard work," Corinne said, making notes on her clipboard. "This is a violation that could result in a $50 fine." $50 for leaving trash bins out for 2 hours. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice calm. "Okay, I will move them right now. Is there anything else?" Corinne looked around our property like she was hunting for violations. "Your firewood pile is not properly covered. All outdoor storage must be neat and orderly according to Section 12 of the HOA guidelines. And your vehicle," she pointed at my pickup truck parked in our driveway. "Commercial vehicles are not permitted in residential driveways overnight." "That is not a commercial vehicle. That is my personal truck." "It has a company logo on the side," Corinne said, walking over to examine my truck more closely. "Henderson Construction. That makes it a commercial vehicle." I run a small construction business, and yes, my truck has my company name on it. But it is also my personal vehicle, the only truck I own. Where exactly am I supposed to park my truck? "Commercial vehicles must be parked in enclosed garages or off the property entirely," Corinne said, still writing notes. "This is a $100 violation." $100 for parking my own truck in my own driveway. I could feel my temper rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Look, Corinne, we just moved in a few weeks ago. We are still getting settled and learning all the rules. Can we maybe have a conversation about this instead of jumping straight to fines?" Corinne looked up from her clipboard with cold eyes. "The HOA regulations apply to all residents equally, regardless of how long they have lived here. Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse." She spent another 10 minutes walking around our property, finding fault with everything from the placement of our outdoor furniture to the height of our grass. According to Corinne, we were violating at least 6 different HOA regulations, with total fines that could add up to over $400. "I will be submitting this report to the HOA board," she said as she walked back to her car. "You will receive official violation notices in the mail within 5 business days. The fines must be paid within 30 days, or additional penalties will apply." I watched her drive away, feeling like I had just been mugged in my own driveway. When Sarah finished her call and came outside, I told her what had happened. "She find us for what?" Sarah asked, her voice taking on the sharp edge I recognized from her work calls. "Everything. The trash, the firewood, my truck, even the grass being half an inch too tall in one section." Sarah looked around our property, then back at me. "Did she measure the grass?" "No, she just eyeballed it. And she fined us $400 based on her visual inspection." Sarah's FBI training was kicking in. She was asking the kinds of questions that agents ask when something does not add up. That is what she said. Sarah walked over to where my truck was parked and examined it carefully. "This is not a commercial vehicle under any reasonable definition. You are not hauling cargo or conducting business with it. This is harassment." I had never seen Sarah apply her professional skills to a personal situation like this, but watching her analyze Corinne's behavior was both impressive and a little scary. She was already building a case in her mind. "We need to document everything," Sarah said. "Every interaction, every violation notice, every fine. If this woman wants to play games, we will play by the rules. All of them." Corinne's violation notices arrived exactly 5 days later, just as she had promised. 8 separate violations with detailed descriptions and corresponding fines. The total came to $425 for things like improper outdoor storage, non-compliant vehicle display, and insufficient landscape maintenance. But that was just the beginning. Over the next month, Corinne appeared at our property at least twice a week, always with her clipboard, always finding new violations. She measured the distance between our outdoor chairs and the property line. She counted the number of decorative stones in our flower beds. She even brought a ruler to measure the height of our mailbox post. "Your mailbox is 34 inches high," she announced one Friday afternoon. HOA regulations specify a maximum height of 36 inches, but also require that all mailboxes be uniform with the neighborhood standard, which is 32 inches. This is a non-compliance issue. I looked down the road at the other mailboxes. They were all different heights, different styles, different colors. Which one is the neighborhood standard? "I will need to research that and get back to you," Corinne said, making more notes. She never got back to me about the mailbox. Instead, she found 12 other violations during her research trip around the neighborhood. None of the other residents seemed to be getting the same level of attention. Sarah and I started keeping detailed records of every interaction. I took photos of Corinne on our property, documented the time and date of each visit, and kept copies of all violation notices. Sarah suggested we also research Corinne's background and her role in the HOA. "Something is not right about this," Sarah told me one evening as we reviewed the latest batch of violations. "I have dealt with power-hungry bureaucrats before, but this feels different. This feels personal." Sarah was right. Corinne seemed to be targeting us specifically. While she was measuring our grass with a ruler, the house across the lake had been storing a broken-down boat in their front yard for months. While she was fining us for having outdoor furniture too close to the property line, our neighbor 2 houses down had a rusted car on blocks in their driveway. "She is not enforcing the rules," Sarah observed. "She is weaponizing them." The harassment escalated when Corinne started showing up unannounced and walking around our property without permission. She would park at the end of our driveway and march up to our house like she had every right to be there. When I confronted her about trespassing, she claimed she had HOA authority to inspect any property for compliance violations. "You need to understand something," Corinne told me during one of these uninvited inspections. I have been the compliance coordinator for this community for 8 years. I know every rule, every regulation, and every legal precedent that applies to this property. You can either work with me, or you can face the consequences." "What consequences?" I asked. Karen smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "The HOA has the authority to place liens on non-compliant properties. We can force sales to recover unpaid fines and fees. We can make your life very difficult if you continue to resist reasonable community standards." That night, Sarah spent hours on her laptop, researching HOA laws and Corinne's background. What she found made both of us very uncomfortable. "Corinne has been involved in forcing 3 other families out of this neighborhood in the past 5 years," Sarah told me. "All of them were newer residents who lived on lakefront properties. All of them ended up selling their homes and moving away after mounting HOA fines and legal pressure." Sarah showed me the public records she had accessed through her federal databases. Corinne had been escalating enforcement actions against specific residents, always people who lived on the most valuable properties in the community. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. "She is not just a power-hungry HOA coordinator," Sarah said. "She is running a scheme to force people out so the HOA can acquire their properties or pressure them into quick sales below market value." "Can she actually do that?" "Not legally," Sarah said. "But if residents do not know their rights, if they get overwhelmed by the harassment and legal threats, they might give up and sell rather than fight." Sarah's professional instincts were fully engaged now. She was not just dealing with an annoying neighbor anymore. She was investigating what appeared to be a pattern of fraud and harassment targeting multiple families. "We need more evidence," Sarah said. "I want to know exactly how many families Corinne has targeted, how much money is involved, and whether any federal laws have been violated." I watched my wife transform from a frustrated homeowner into a federal investigator. Corinne had no idea what she had unleashed, but I was starting to feel sorry for her. Almost. The breaking point came on a cold November morning when Corinne showed up at our door with 2 men in suits. She had that same fake smile, but her eyes were harder than I had ever seen them. "Good morning," she said, like this was a friendly social call. "These gentlemen are from Peterson and Associates, the law firm that handles HOA enforcement for our community. We need to discuss your continued noncompliance with community standards." The older lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, stepped forward with a briefcase. "Mr. Henderson, I am Attorney Peterson. We represent the Pine Lake Homeowners Association in all legal matters. You currently owe $4,600 in accumulated fines and penalties for various violations of HOA regulations." $4,600. My mouth went dry. The fines had been adding up, but I had no idea they had reached that level. "We have been working to address the violations," I said. "Some of these fines are for things that are completely unreasonable." "Reasonable or not," Peterson said, "you agreed to abide by all HOA regulations when you purchased your property. Failure to pay these fines within 30 days will result in a lien being placed on your home." Corinne was practically glowing with satisfaction. "We have also discovered additional violations during our most recent inspections. Your lakefront access appears to exceed the boundaries specified in your property deed." "What are you talking about?" I asked. Corinne pulled out a surveyor's map and spread it on our porch table. "According to this survey, your private lake access extends only to this point here." She pointed to a spot about 50 feet from our back deck. "Everything beyond that point is common HOA property. You have been trespassing on community land for months." I stared at the map. If Corinne was right, we would lose access to most of the lakefront we thought we owned. The entire reason we bought this property was for the private lake access. Without it, our dream home would be just another house in the woods. "This is impossible," I said. "Our realtor showed us the full lakefront. It was part of the listing." "Real estate agents make mistakes," Peterson said. "The HOA has had this property properly surveyed, and the results are clear. You will need to cease all use of the disputed lakefront area immediately." "And if we do not?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Corinne leaned forward, and I could see the victory in her eyes. "Then, we will be forced to pursue legal action for trespassing, in addition to the existing fines. The total cost could easily exceed $10,000, plus attorney fees and court costs." "Or," Peterson added, "you could consider selling your property and relocating somewhere more suitable for your needs. The HOA would be willing to facilitate a quick sale to avoid the costs and stress of prolonged legal action." There it was, the real agenda. They wanted us gone, and they were willing to destroy us financially to make it happen. "I need to discuss this with my wife," I said. "Of course," Corinne said, "but understand that this situation will not improve with time. The longer you wait, the more expensive it becomes. We will expect your decision within 1 week." After they left, I found Sarah in her home office, staring out at the lake we apparently did not own. I told her everything that had happened, watching her face grow darker with each detail. "They are trying to steal our home," she said quietly. "Can they do that?" Sarah turned away from the window and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was the look of a federal agent who had just identified a target. "They can try," she said, "but Corinne has made a very serious mistake." "What mistake?" "She has been conducting what appears to be a systematic fraud operation, targeting multiple families for financial gain. She has been using her position in the HOA to harass residents and force them into selling their properties under duress. And now, she has threatened federal agents with false legal action." Sarah walked over to her desk and pulled out a file folder that was already thick with documents. "I have been building a case against Corinne for the past month. I have evidence of her pattern of targeting lakefront property owners, financial records showing unusual HOA expenditures, and testimony from at least 6 families who were forced to sell their homes after similar harassment." "You have been investigating her." "I have been doing my job," Sarah said. "Corinne crossed the line from neighborhood harassment into federal fraud territory when she started using false legal threats to force property sales. She is about to discover the difference between local HOA authority and federal law enforcement." Sarah picked up her phone and started dialing. "I am calling my team. It is time to open an official investigation into Pine Lake HOA and its compliance coordinator." I watched my wife make the call that would change everything. Corinne thought she was dealing with a helpless couple who would be intimidated by lawyers and fake surveys. She had no idea she had just threatened someone who could destroy her entire operation with a single phone call. The war was about to begin, and Corinne had chosen the wrong enemy. While Corinne was probably celebrating her victory at home, Sarah was turning our dining room into a federal investigation command center. Within hours of her phone call, she had files spread across every surface, her laptop connected to secure FBI databases, and a team of agents providing remote support. "Tell me what you found," I said, looking at the documents she had printed out. Sarah held up a thick stack of papers. Corinne Mueller has been running this operation for 8 years, ever since she was elected to the HOA board. In that time, 23 families have sold their homes and moved away after facing escalating HOA fines and legal threats. 23 families. All of them owned premium lakefront properties. All of them were newer residents who did not have established relationships in the community, and all of them sold their homes for significantly less than market value. Sarah showed me a spreadsheet that made my blood boil. Corinne had been systematically targeting the most valuable properties in the neighborhood, using her HOA position to harass owners until they gave up and sold. Here is how the scheme works, Sarah explained. Corinne identifies a target property, usually one that has recently sold to new owners. She begins aggressive enforcement of HOA regulations against that property only, while ignoring similar violations by other residents. The fines accumulate rapidly because she creates violations that are impossible to fix. Like measuring grass with a ruler, I said. Exactly. She documents everything to create a paper trail that looks official, but the enforcement is completely arbitrary. When the fines reach several $1,000s, she brings in the lawyer to threaten liens and foreclosure. Sarah pulled out another document. But here is the interesting part. Attorney Peterson is not actually representing the HOA. He is Corinne's personal attorney, and he has been splitting the legal fees with her for years. The HOA board has no idea he is threatening residents on their behalf. So she is stealing from the HOA and the residents. It gets worse, Sarah said. Remember that survey she showed us today? I had our property professionally surveyed 3 years ago when we were considering buying it. Our lakefront access extends exactly where we thought it did. Corinne's survey was fake. Sarah handed me a legitimate survey document that clearly showed our property boundaries. We owned every inch of lakefront we thought we did. Corinne had been lying about the property dispute to pressure us into selling. She has been using fake surveys, false legal threats, and fraudulent fines to steal people's homes, Sarah said. This is not just HOA harassment. This is organized fraud on a massive scale. Over the next 3 days, Sarah worked around the clock to build her case. She contacted every family that had been forced to sell, gathering evidence of Corinne's pattern of harassment. She analyzed HOA financial records and discovered that Corinne had been embezzling funds for years. Look at this, Sarah said, showing me bank statements on her laptop. Corinne has been collecting fines from residents and depositing them into a personal account instead of the HOA treasury. She has stolen over $40,000 in the past 2 years alone. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit was very interested in Corinne's activities. Wire fraud, mail fraud, extortion, and embezzlement were all federal crimes that carried serious prison time. Sarah's team was building a case that could put Corinne away for decades. We also found connections to a property development company that has been buying up the foreclosed homes at below-market prices, Sarah told me. Corinne has been getting kickbacks for steering distressed sales to specific buyers. The conspiracy was even bigger than we had imagined. Corinne was not just a power-hungry HOA coordinator. She was the center of a criminal network that had been stealing homes and defrauding families for years. What happens now? I asked. Now we gather enough evidence to ensure convictions, Sarah said. I want to make sure Corinne and everyone involved in this scheme faces the maximum penalties under federal law. Sarah was working with a team of agents who specialized in white-collar crime and fraud investigations. They were treating Corinne's operation like any other organized criminal enterprise, using surveillance, financial analysis, and witness testimony to build an airtight case. The best part, Sarah said with a smile that reminded me why criminals should be afraid of her, is that Karen has no idea any of this is happening. She thinks she is dealing with intimidated homeowners who will fold under pressure. She has no clue that she has been under federal investigation for the past week. While Karen was probably planning her next move to force us out of our home, federal agents were planning her arrest. The tables had turned completely, and Karen had no idea that her world was about to collapse. "How long before you move on her?" I asked. "Soon," Sarah said. "We want to catch her in the act of committing another crime so we can add to the charges. I suspect she will escalate the pressure on us over the next few days, and when she does, we will be ready." I looked out at our lake, knowing that Karen would never threaten our home again. Justice was coming, and it was going to be swift and thorough. Karen made her final move on a Tuesday morning, and it was exactly as bold and stupid as Sarah had predicted. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I saw the convoy of vehicles coming up our driveway. Karen's silver sedan was leading the way, followed by a police cruiser and a large white van with Peterson and Associates Legal Services painted on the side. "Sarah," I called, "you need to see this." Sarah came to the window, took one look at the approaching vehicles, and smiled. Perfect timing. She is about to commit multiple felonies in front of witnesses. Karen climbed out of her car wearing a bright red blazer like she was dressed for a victory celebration. She had brought attorney Peterson, two men who looked like private security guards, and a sheriff's deputy who appeared confused about why he was there. "This is it," Karen announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Official eviction, notice for violation of HOA regulations and trespassing on community property." She marched up to our front door like she owned the place, with her entourage following behind. I opened the door before she could knock. "Good morning, Karen," I said calmly. "What can I do for you?" "You can start packing," Karen said, holding up an official-looking document. "This is a formal eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises or face arrest for criminal trespassing." The sheriff's deputy stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I need to clarify something. I was told this was a standard property dispute that required law enforcement presence, but I cannot enforce an eviction without a court order." "The HOA has full authority to remove non-compliant residents," Karen snapped. "I have been coordinating with your department for weeks on this matter." That was a lie, and everyone knew it. The deputy's radio squawked, and he stepped away to answer a call. I could see him growing more confused as he spoke to his dispatcher. Attorney Peterson tried to take control of the situation. "Mr. Henderson, my client has the legal authority to reclaim this property for the homeowners association. Your continued occupation constitutes criminal trespassing and property theft." "Property theft?" Sarah's voice came from behind me, and I could hear the steel in her tone. "That is an interesting accusation." Sarah stepped outside, and I noticed she was wearing her FBI badge on her belt. She looked completely calm and professional, like she was handling a routine arrest. "And you are?" Peterson asked, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Special Agent Sarah Henderson, Federal Bureau of Investigation," Sarah said, showing her credentials. "I believe you gentlemen are the ones who need to be concerned about criminal charges." The change in atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Peterson's face went white, and the two security guards took a step backward. Karen looked confused, like she was having trouble processing what she had just heard. "FBI," Karen stammered. What does the FBI have to do with an HOA dispute? The FBI has everything to do with wire fraud, mail fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit theft, Sarah said calmly, all of which you have been committing for the past 8 years. Corinne's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I do not know what you're talking about. I am just enforcing community standards. You mean like the fake survey you used to threaten us with false trespassing charges? Sarah pulled out a document from her jacket. Or the fraudulent fines you have been collecting from residents and depositing into your personal bank account. Peterson tried to interrupt. Agent Henderson, I think there has been some misunderstanding about my client's role in the HOA. There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Peterson, Sarah said. You have been participating in this conspiracy by threatening residents with false legal action and splitting the fees with Ms. Mueller. That makes you an accessory to multiple federal crimes. The sheriff's deputy finished his radio call and walked back over to the group. His entire demeanor had changed. Ma'am, I just spoke with my supervisor. We have been instructed to provide any assistance requested by federal agents and to place any individuals under arrest if directed. Corinne finally understood what was happening. The color drained from her face and she started backing toward her car. This is insane. I have not committed any crimes. I have been protecting our community from people who refuse to follow the rules. Rules that you selectively enforce, Sarah asked. Rules that you use to harass specific residents while ignoring identical violations by others. Rules that you manipulate to generate fraudulent fines and legal fees. Sarah stepped closer to Corinne, and I could see the federal agent taking control of the situation. Corinne Mueller, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, extortion, and embezzlement. You cannot arrest me, Corinne shrieked. I am a pillar of this community. I have done nothing but serve the Homeowners Association for 8 years. You have served yourself, Sarah said as the deputy moved to handcuff Corinne. You have stolen over $40,000 from residents, forced 23 families from their homes, and corrupted the legal process for personal gain. As Corinne was being read her rights, 2 unmarked FBI vehicles pulled into our driveway. Sarah's backup team had arrived to arrest Peterson and seize evidence from the legal services van. The confrontation that Corinne had planned as her moment of victory had become the scene of her complete downfall. Instead of evicting us from our home, she was being evicted from her freedom. As they led Corinne away in handcuffs, she looked back at our house with pure hatred in her eyes. This is not over, she screamed. You have no idea who you are dealing with. Sarah watched the police car drive away and then turned to me with a satisfied smile. Actually, Corinne, you had no idea who you were dealing with, and now it is over. The aftermath of Corinne's arrest was swift and thorough. Within hours, FBI agents were searching her home, her office, and seizing financial records that revealed the full scope of her criminal operation. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly our quiet lakefront community was the center of a federal fraud investigation. Corinne was denied bail after prosecutors argued she was a flight risk with access to stolen funds. Her arraignment was a media circus, with reporters documenting every detail of the charges against her. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, extortion, and embezzlement. The potential prison sentence was 35 years. Attorney Peterson was arrested the same day and immediately began cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed additional details about Corinne's operation, including bribes paid to local officials and connections to a property development company that had been buying foreclosed homes at below-market prices. The most satisfying part was watching the other victims come forward. Sarah's investigation had identified 23 families who had been forced from their homes, but once the news broke, dozens more contacted the FBI with similar stories. Karen's reign of terror had affected far more people than anyone had realized. The Hendersons, the family that had lived 2 houses down from us, called me personally to thank Sarah for her work. They had been forced to sell their dream home after Karen accused them of violating wetland regulations that did not actually exist. "We lost everything," Mrs. Henderson told me through tears. "Our retirement savings, our home, our peace of mind. We thought we were the only ones, that we had somehow failed to understand the rules." "You were not alone," I assured her, "and Karen is going to pay for what she did to all of you." The HOA board, once they learned the truth about Karen's activities, was horrified. They had been completely manipulated by her false reports and fraudulent enforcement actions. The legitimate board members had no idea that Karen was stealing from residents and using fake legal threats to force people from their homes. "We trusted her completely," the HOA president told reporters. "She presented herself as someone who cared deeply about maintaining community standards. We had no idea she was running a criminal enterprise." The board immediately suspended all pending fines and violation notices, pending a complete review of Karen's actions. They also voted to reimburse residents who had been forced to pay fraudulent fines, using funds recovered from Karen's personal accounts. 3 months later, Karen was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to all charges. The judge called her crimes a systematic betrayal of trust that destroyed families and corrupted the legal process for personal gain. Peterson received a lighter sentence of 8 years in exchange for his cooperation, but his law license was permanently revoked. The property development company that had been buying foreclosed homes was shut down, and its principals faced their own federal charges. Sarah received a commendation from the FBI for her work on the case, which eventually led to federal charges against similar HOA fraud schemes in 6 other states. Her investigation had uncovered a pattern of corruption that was more widespread than anyone had imagined. But the best part was not the justice served or the criminals punished. The best part was getting our life back. Sarah and I are sitting on our deck this morning, watching the sunrise paint our lake gold and pink. The ducks are back, gliding across the perfect mirror of the water. There are no violation notices in our mailbox, no unwanted visitors with clipboards, no threats or legal fears hanging over our heads. "Do you regret buying this place?" Sarah asks, sipping her coffee and watching a hawk circle overhead. I look around at our 42 acres of peace and quiet, at the mountains reflected in our private lake, at the home we saved for years to buy. "Not for a single second," I tell her. "This is exactly where we belong." Karen thought she could use her position and her fake authority to steal our dream. She thought we were just another couple who would be intimidated by legal threats and fraudulent fines. She was wrong about everything. Justice sometimes comes from unexpected places. Sometimes it comes from people who refuse to back down when bullies try to take what they have earned. And sometimes it comes from federal agents who know the difference between real authority and the fake power of petty tyrants. Our paradise is still here, more beautiful than ever, and it is ours forever.